I'd probably be willing to bet that I might give off the impression of being somebody who is a collector and likely collector of records, vinyl, LPs. I know, it's just a bad habit I have to reiterate my point, but I'm sure you get the gist. I collect records. I listen to records. I love records. And one favorite from my collection I want to talk about is the White Album by the Beatles. This is indeed a favorite from my collection. I purchased it for over $40 back in 2004 from an antique shop which used to be in downtown Portsmouth. I wanted it so bad I could not wait to make sure I had enough money. I just knew I had the right amount in my wallet. I drove and I got it. It meant that much to me to get it. But being that I was young and dumb, I didn't take very good care of it, unfortunately. I loved my vinyl, but I went through a very irresponsible stage in my life. I moved out of my parents' house eventually, about a year after my dad's death. And one stupid thing I did with this timeless classic, this record I bought for over $40, I took the poster out of it and hung it on my bedroom wall. And it got lost and probably thrown away after I moved out of my parents' house. And later on, at my house I moved into, I left the kitchen sink on, and my home flooded a little bit with water, reaching my vinyl collection, which was not very well kept at the moment, and this album got water damage. Not the records itself, luckily, just the packaging. So I lost the poster and I damaged the vinyl casing. There's all this water damage right here. Luckily, though, it did not affect the records themselves. They still play. Very good, I might add. I mean, just one little skip on Dear Prudence. Otherwise, both LPs within this set play. Luckily, at least I still have the pictures. I lost the poster, which was in great condition. At least I still have the pictures. John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. But there's something to think of when it comes to the Beatles and modern day pop music. You probably barely ever find one modern artist, be they R&B, dubstep, hip hop, metal, who does not claim to be influenced by the Beatles in one way or another. Now, of course, some take the route and say that they hate the Beatles, and that's fine. But I'm not going to do that. I personally have been a fan of the Beatles for a long time, since I was borrowing my dad's cassettes back in 1996 and listening to them repeatedly. I mean, my God, I don't know how I did not break those tapes from listening to them every second of every day. When I'm obsessive, I am obsessive. I am the same now as I was then, which is hence why when I have MP3s and CDs were always in availability, I insist on spending the extra money for vinyl. Because something about vinyl is something I just like. It's not like a collection of CDs. It's not like MP3s. Something about vinyl, it all goes together somehow. The different genres, the different bands. You have them all in a certain section. But I could pull any of them out, put them on my turntable, and it's equal joy. I don't differentiate the year or the genre. I could put on Curtis Mayfield. I could put on Elvis Costello. Then I could put on the Dead Kennedys or Scream. Any of my favorite hardcore punk bands, which I happen to be lucky enough to have a vinyl copy of. It's all good music to me. Fortunately, I neglected this one for quite a while. I had to listen to it for years, and it's hard to have time to listen to vinyl, really, especially if you work over 50 hours a week and you've got so many other commitments. When I'm not working, I want to travel. I have schoolwork I'm worried about. several different things, and I need to sleep. And I'm quite a heavy sleeper. I'm a lazy motherfucker, as you probably noticed looking at me. I am. God, my hair needs cut again. I have the Justin Bieber deal go on. Or I guess maybe we could say, since we're talking about the Beatles look going on, which I would much rather call it. But there's something to be said, though. I mean, even though the packaging is damaged, the LP still play fine. And this, I believe, is original pressing. Probably, if not from 1968 when the album was released, from the 1970s or so. It is not a remastered copy I bought at a bookstore. It is, well, like I said, I bought it at an antique shop. It is basically an original kind of LP copy. It has the wear and tear from years of being around. Despite my water damage, I mean, also there's just the ring on the outside. The ring from the vinyl lying within it. But luckily, the vinyl itself is in very good shape. I mean, it's beautiful. And it plays, I mean, listening to it is a joy. I think it's a divisive album. I think basically because the Beatles were at such a rough time when they recorded this album, near the time of breaking up, not getting along, different musical ideas, well divided opinion. Regardless, I think it is heralded as a classic. If you listen to this album and you have somewhat of a knowledge of music like I do, like you've listened to bands from the 60s onward to present, from Roxy Music to Pink Floyd to The Clash to REM, if you listen to this album, I mean, with anything the Beatles did, honestly, they were ahead of their time. It was like 1968, and while so many other bands were deep entrenched within psychedelic sort of being trapped within the psychedelia, incense peppermints, the Beatles were doing their own thing. They were pioneers. They were ahead of the curve. Like the Velvet Underground, doing something completely out of sync with what other bands at the time were doing. But of course I could argue the Rolling Stones were certainly doing interesting stuff. The Byrds were doing interesting stuff. Of course they were borrowing heavily from Bob Dylan, but they always had something interesting going on for at least until 1969 or 1970. The Beatles, I mean, but still they were a step ahead. I mean, if you listen to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, or you listen to the White Album, or Abbey Road, it's hard to believe it was the late 60s. It sounds like what the New York Dolls and Roxy Music would be doing years later, you know? I mean, the Beatles were ahead of the curve of reviving some 50s rock and roll and mixing folk music and synthesizers, I mean, and social commentary with pig noises. They had Roxy Music and Pink Floyd beat by a lawn slide. And it's just so ahead of its time. And just a lovely record in my collection. I don't know what more I could say about it. You know, I had this elaborate script in my brain, but I did not write it down. I just know basically I'm saying the bare minimum of what I plan to say. Because if anybody looks at my other videos on here, I have an annoying voice and I don't talk very professionally. I just am too lazy and too tired and too busy to write scripts, to plan this all out, to want to go through video editing procedures, to do fancy shit. I just want to make it as minimal as possible, show what life experiences I am going through. And the most probably I'll get on any video is maybe 15 views, most of which might be my own, and some troll trying to bring me down, giving me a thumb down for no reason. That's the most of what I might get out of YouTube, but I do at least want to share something with YouTube, something with whoever watches. In the time where everybody is so concerned with SJWs and Pepe the Frog, dank memes and culture wars, I just want to offer just some art. I want to show you an appreciation of art. And if there's art, it's music. And in the vinyl form especially. And especially when it comes to the Beatles. A great album. I'm not Anthony Fantano, so I'm not going to give it a rating or anything. I'm just going to say that if by any chance you are a vinyl collecting junkie like myself, and you can afford it somehow, this is probably great to have within your collection. Whether it is somewhat of an original like I own and got from a antique shop, or if you can find a remastered version at your local Books A Million or Barnes & Noble. I think it's worth owning one way or another. Or even not in vinyl form. CD, MP3. Music can be enjoyed one way or another. But for some odd reason, I don't know why, there's a big joy of listening to vinyl. Thank you very much.